Oh, hello. Thank you all for coming down today for this artist talk with Anna Park. We're all seated inside the wonderful exhibition, Look, Anna Park. And I just want to welcome you all to the Art Gallery of Western Australia here on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja. And thank you all so much for being here, giving up your lovely, sunny Saturday afternoon, especially for an artist who's flown so far to be here all the way from New York, New York. My name's Rachel Cheshler, and I'm the lead curator for the Simon Lee Foundation Institute of Contemporary Asian Art at the Art Gallery of Western Australia. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to Anna Park. Before we launch into this conversation today, which will go for roughly 45 minutes, after that we'll open it up to the audience for questions and answers, and then we invite everyone to join us in the Design Store and Cafe afterwards for a book signing, because we've produced a publication to go alongside the exhibition. I just want to first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Anna. So, this talk is programmed to coincide with the exhibition, which presents 15 new works on paper by Anna Park, which are made using charcoal and ink, but we'll talk about this over the course of the conversation. They're very indicative of how Anna works, which is this teetering between expressive abstraction and a more stylized, simplified version of figuration. And it was such a pleasure to work on this show with Anna. She's an artist that really approached it with a lot of joy and humour, and our numerous studio visits, which took place over Zoom, her being in Brooklyn and myself being here in Perth, and a lot of WhatsApp conversations and a lot of shared JPEGs. It really kind of, over that process, we kind of got to know what this exhibition will be. So we started, to give you some context, we started talking about the show by early 2023, so just at the time that we opened the exhibition with Yoshitomo Nara, and the lovely Patty Nam, who connected myself and Anna. And it was really from, I guess, Patty and her enthusiasm for the art gallery that this show's come about. And so we maybe started talking, I think we had our first studio visit maybe in July, but maybe it was also actually November. I think we started talking over email in July, but maybe we didn't have a studio visit to November, or it was quite late in some ways. Anna can work very, very quickly. And we were talking about what the show might be, and she was like, I want to make a new body of work, which as a curator is kind of like the dream. You're always like, oh my gosh, really? That's what you want to do? Okay, let's do it. You don't have that much time, but like, I'm here for it. And you made these 15 works, which are massive. And I think when you see them online, you don't quite appreciate the scale of them. And then to be sitting here in the gallery with them all, it really changes your perception of them. And so I do encourage those of us who can't be here today but might be listening to this talk later to come in and view them for yourselves. So I guess, I won't take up too much more time because you're here to hear from Anna. But it's really been a show that, as we've spoken, it's just felt more and more relevant, more and more timely, more and more urgent. She really is part of a younger generation of artists who are channeling the chaotic energy of this present moment into really powerful artworks that capture the vulnerability and the psychological tension that sort of simmers, underneath all human interactions, whether that be physical or online. And so for that's why I think, she really truly is a major new figure in contemporary drawing practice. You can see from the works themselves, the graphic nature of them, that she takes inspiration from popular culture, communal experiences, and more intimate interpersonal exchanges. And now she uses all of these to address the cultural construction and perception of identity, sexuality, and power within our increasingly media-saturated social environments. So as I said, the show came about at the start of 2023. A lot has happened over this past year, and as I've been following Anna's works for the last few years now, it's been interesting to see these shifts and changes in her practice, which, you know, I mean, you only graduated, I guess, like 2021, I want to say? 2020, okay, I almost got there. Close. So, like, it's been quite quick in many ways. But you currently live in Brooklyn, but you were born in South Korea in 1996, and you immigrated to the United States as a child. You first lived in LA, and then you settled in Utah. And so maybe it's a good place to start with perhaps one of your more explicitly self-referential, portraits in a way. I mean, they're all self-portraits in a way, which is Picture That, which sits to the right-hand side of me, which, is it fair to say, is about your experiences growing up in what's a very white Midwestern community. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what it was like when you first, maybe talk to me about what it was like in Korea, and then what it was like to move to America and how those have sort of filtered, those experiences make their way into the drawings that we see here.
Hello. Oh, hi. Thank you so much for coming, first of all, and thank you, Rachel, for speaking with me today. It's been an absolute dream coming to Perth and, yeah, seeing the work in this, like, context. And, oh my God, there's so many people in here. Sorry, I'm like really nervous. So I guess with this work, Picture That I think this was one of the first this is like the body of work that felt most personal to me so far. And I think because in the past, like, I hadn't really been able to, like, key into very personal experiences. Like, maybe I just wasn't ready for that yet. And this piece in particular, so a little background, like Rachel said, I was born in Korea, and then I moved to the States around when I was 10 years old, and but lived in Utah for 8 years. And I'm not sure if anybody knows a lot about Utah. It's quite different from Korea, or, you know, it's just a pretty quiet place, I would say. Not like, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me, and I think as a little kid, like, having moved around so often, like, it kind of forced me to be this constant voyeur in the ever-changing, like, landscapes and environments I was living in, and I was so aware of, like, how different I was. I mean, just the fact that I was, like, an Asian kid and in a school where, you know, you didn't really see a lot of other Asian kids. So this piece specifically kind of ties into, you know, when I was, like, a little girl, like, all I wanted to do was, like, look like my friends. And I think when you're younger, all you want to do is kind of blend in. You don't want to be, like, noticed all that much. And I think because of, like, the culture shock, as well as, like, the like, you know, having to learn English in a fairly quick, like, fast pace, I had been like, okay, if I had just been blonde, like a blonde girl in this town, like, it might have made things a little easier. So I had the type blonde with the exclamation point, but then it's at the vantage point as if I was a younger kid looking above. And then on the other section is, like, a cartoonish feature with, like, literal whiteout on the facial features and the eyes, because that was something that was, like, constantly on my mind as I was growing up in Utah. So yeah, that was a very long, drawn-out way of describing the work.
It wasn't long. It wasn't long or drawn out at all, and it was concise and to the point, and I think something that's very relatable for a lot of people here in Perth too. While, you know, it's a very diverse place, a lot of different people from different backgrounds here, but at the same time, many people would have also gone to school and had that similar felt experience. And we all just want to be seen, and we all just want to blend in. And
Yeah.
even as we get older, it doesn't, we think we work through it, but we don't really.
Yeah.
Or, you know, we push out into the world in different ways. And I think it's a nice thing to sort of think about that layering that goes on in regards to identity and how we construct ourselves and how we perform ourselves in these various different social worlds. And maybe how that layering has sort of made its way into your drawing practice. And I think what really gives them the sort of punch is the fact that you work in this kind of collage style. And, you know, I mean, we might go into that in a second, but I think it might be a good place to also sort of talk a little bit more about drawing and drawing itself as a medium, because it's, while it's having something of a renaissance right now, you know, it's always kind of seen sometimes as rather conservative. You know, maybe it's resistant to innovation. Of course, all of this shifted in the second half of the 20th century, but it's still sometimes seen as like a support medium, an adjunct to the real arts of painting or sculpture. But of course, it has its own distinct expressive potentials, which you can see here. And for me, it's really a medium that feels intimate and immediate. And I think that's part of its pull right now, coming out of something like COVID and wanting to be with this medium where you can really feel that the distance between the artists themselves and the paper is very, very small. And it's something that allows you, who works with depicting human relationships and recording them, and drawing is that means of recording and depicting the world. It always exists now. People always talk about drawing existing in the time of its unfolding. And then when you combine that with pop art, which is what you see here with a lot of these references, you can see like some references to Andy Warhol or Ed Ruscha. We spoke about Barbara Kruger. It makes sense that it reflects the times. And so I guess, why did you wish to work in this medium, which I think it's kind of difficult to work with? What drew you to drawing in the first place?
I'm like trying to give like either the most diplomatic answer or the more
Don't give the diplomatic answer. We're not here for diplomacy.
Right. I've loved drawing ever since I was a little kid, and I think having been in a grad school where it was, like you said, kind of seen, you know, as a means to an end, like drawing was, you know, there was a hierarchy. It was unsaid but felt, you know, of drawing. You know, like I would have professors ask me, like, oh, when are you ready to paint now? Like, you've drawn enough, like, don't you think? So I think a part of me was just like my either problem with authority or like it was just more. I don't know. There was so much about drawing that I felt like. There's so much more to explore with it, and even within the parameters of like a monochromatic palette, and it is a very forgiving medium, and I love that like the surface of the paper is like this kind of ephemeral, you know, organic quality to it. Like it's this, you know, like an introduction to the the rice paper that I'm using. Like, you know, there's so much unpredictability to it, where the folds of the paper are only revealed when I do like washes of the ink and paint on top. So yeah, I'm obsessed. I don't know. I just
No, because it's interesting when you say about the paper and the materiality of it, because you used to work, I guess, with, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but one sheet of paper, and that would then obviously be framed behind glazing, as it is with drawing. Like, they're very fragile, but you wanted that materiality to be front and center in a way. So you worked out this new way of working so that you didn't have to have your pictures behind glass.
Right. Yeah. So there is like a fragileness just to works on paper. I love works on paper, but it was just like logistically, like the way to present it in a safe way was behind glass, and I felt like the glass was like almost like this condom or some, I don't know, very like, it's just like you just want to feel the texture and see the kind of like all the minutia and the subtleties of like the drawings. So it was kind of my way of trying to break out of like the confines of framed works. Although I do love just working straight on paper these days, like and maybe I wanted to consider like the objectness of something too. So like that's why I also started doing kind of the more relief like carving in this body of work too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think objectness is a really perfect word to describe these works. And for those, because I'm sure it's quite interesting, it seems to come up again and again. How do you actually make these works? Because there are these kind of part sculptural reliefs. So what's the actual process involved technically for that? How do you build them up?
Oh, it's very unglamorous, I would say. It's it's like wooden panel, and then I use like the purple insulation foam, and then I carve into it, glue it on, sand it down, and it's like just layered process of sanding, painting on top, and then I paper mache the rice paper and then a mixture on top, because I still wanted the surface that I'm working on to be paper. So it was like my dip into sculpture, but not fully commit to a wood like I don't know, like wood cutting. I don't even know
Woodworking.
woodworking. Yeah. I just don't have that skill set yet. So this was like, I don't know. I thought I could kind of explore it without feeling so, I don't know. Yeah, committed to it, I guess.
No. I think that that's what really pushes it in this interesting direction, and it's something you started to see in your previous body of work, Mirror Shy, and then has really kind of leaned into that further. But what's kind of interesting about the works too, and when you're sitting inside here, is like they obviously have this strong graphic identity, but then on close approach, you start to see the minutiae and the technicality of the drawing, the different gradations in terms of charcoal, what might seem like just a kind of very velvety texture, and then you're like, oh, there's some coolness, there's some warmth. All of these things are starting to develop as I get closer to the image itself. And I guess that comes from, because you were trained quite technically in a way, and you had this mentor that you spoke about when you were in Utah. And so what was it like, what was your experience learning to draw, and then where did you study when you came to New York? Because I think for a lot of people here, we don't really know so much about these art schools in New York, and they might be kind of, some of them come with, pretty strict parameters in a way. And so, yeah, but maybe talk about your mentor in Utah and then moving to New York and what it was like to study there.
Yeah, I guess my, I don't know, most of my education, I would say, like my foundation started out in Utah, where I met my like mentor. It's so weird saying mentor because it feels very formal, but he ended up feeling like family at the end of it. He had this program or after school art classes called Visual Art Institute, and I would take classes like every weekend, and that's kind of where I fell in love with drawing in a more like serious way. I mean, I was like 12 when I started, but I think he really taught me like the kind of the hours you need to put in and the kind of diligence, and I was horrible to begin with, and he was definitely like a tough love type of guy, and I just go home like dejected, and I'm just like, what's even the point, like but it really taught me. I'm like, oh, this is dedication. It doesn't come like just out of the whim. Like you really have to be committed to it, and I didn't think that art school was even, or being an artist, like that sounded so abstract, but I ended up applying to a few schools in the East Coast, and then I decided on going to Pratt Institute, which was in New York, and I think I ended up just picking it because wanted to end up in New York City, and it was just, yeah, and they had like Pratt campus cats. I don't know. It's very, like, it just came down to like, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is really nice. And so I went there for 2 years, had left to go to grad school, the New York Academy of Art, and like the teachings were very opposite. Pratt was very conceptual in a lot of ways, like very open. Like it was more like the thought and concept comes first rather than the technical. But I think because my mentor in Utah had been so traditional that I was craving something more traditionally rooted. So I seeked out this grad program, and that's where I went for 3 years, and then still did not graduate. So I have no accreditation for 5 years of school. I don't know. Sorry, Mom. Like, I don't know where you are, but
Oh, you shouldn't have told me you're an art school dropout.
I know,
maybe now I
it
should.
changes
Maybe
things.
we
Like,
shouldn't be
I'll let
showing you.
myself out.
No,
Yeah.
of course not. Of course not. But I think it's interesting because that's what's so great about your work, because like you see these kind of like these really great artists that I feel your work relates to. Like there's a bit of like Alex Katz, John Wesley, there's Barbara Kruger, there's Andy Warhol, all these inspirations. But then you kind of talk a little bit more about like actually it's comics and it's illustrations that really pulled you in, and people like R. Crumb, and like why were the comics, why are the illustrations the things that really spoke to you? Though I do know you see your fair share of art. I see your Instagram and it feels like my eyes on New York City. I'm like, oh, okay, what's happening? Oh, Anna will have seen it. I'm like, great, I don't need to go myself. But like, what is it about comics that drew you in?
I think it was, conceptualizing and getting ready for the show. I was just like, I just wanted to do a fun show, but then kind of look back and to where it all began. And when I just remember as a little kid, I would be so excited like every Sunday to get the Sunday comics, and I would like try to copy the Sunday comics, or have Junie B. Jones books and copy those illustrations. And my initial dream when I was in elementary school was to become an animator, and then I realized everything's digital now, and I'm like technologically just like inept. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just become a fine artist. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember. Oh, comics. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And comic artists, I
Yes,
think, as
yeah.
well.
I think it's also the whole highbrow, lowbrow thing with drawing as well. So I'm like, I'm just gonna fully lean into this idea of like comics are, we're seeing such a very intimate space, and I'm like, what if the whole show was as if you step into a comic book, and kind of absurd, but yeah, well, that'll be kind of funny. I don't know.
We're in the comic book now,
Yeah.
which I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm here for it, because actually at the same time, I sort of feel like in this exhibition, there's so many women, and there's men. There's some men around.
There's some.
They play minor or supporting roles, but it's kind of like I'm kind of gossiping with women, and instead of talking to men, and we've said a bit of that, but at the same time, like, not everything that these women in the show are saying is like particularly positive or uplifting. Some of it's good and some of it's bad. It's definitely not girl power, and that's great because I'm not a Spice Girls fan anyway. But like these women, to me, like they're bad, they're broken, they're dangerous, they're kind of vain, they're taking way too many selfies in the mirror, as someone this week liked to point out to me on my Instagram. But that's okay, because I'm kind of like, thank you for proving my point. And I really hope I continue to bother them and that keep thinking about me, because I quite enjoy that. But like, that's kind of what I wanted to like about this show. It's like, oh, that's the contradictions of being a woman right now. And so I'm kind of glad that these things start to unfold. And that's why I like that this show is fragmented and there's different voices. And there's this ideal woman, but at the same time, she's like every woman, which is what I think sort of begins to unfold as you walk through the show. And so, and that's kind of while you said, maybe the impetus for the exhibition came from what you aspired to be as a young girl and what you saw in mass media, these like filtered images of women who are pristine, who are, the good girl, which shifts across cultures and shifts across class and shifts across things like gender and sexuality. They all sort of reflect this certain ideal, yet they're placed in this chaotic environment, which is sort of our day-to-day experience right now. And I like to think that there's like lots of these, as we spoke more about the way that you make and we kind of spoke about the layering, it's like there's lots of these buried women, like within here, there might be this laughing woman in the thank you piece in the center, but there's like 3 or 4 other like buried women in there. And I kind of like this like metaphor of layering and this way that you collage the paper, because like all of these different selves are how we construct ourselves. And that process of making, which mirrors our own self-identity and our own formations. And so I think maybe I was like, as you were working on this show, like, what did you first think was maybe like the ideal woman? And I know you started with, the first work, which maybe was Picture That, and then it moved towards the last work, which is Finders Keepers, with the sort of vanitas woman holding the mirror. And then there's all these women in between. There's Look, there's My Pleasure. Did you have a certain idea about like the woman you wanted to depict, and did that shift and change? Did you have certain stories in mind? Did some of them fall away and others sort of rise to the surface?
I think initially the very simple idea was I wanted a through line like female figure that was like this constant character that I was depicting, and she would be like placed in these various worlds and situations. And when I was thinking about like, it wasn't like so much about the ideal woman, but maybe just different versions of myself that I wanted to create, although they're like not the likeness of me, but it is my alternate version of myself. I was a lot on my mind was how women are depicted in media today, and it's gotten a bit better, but so much about it is like you're either fall in line with like 3 or 4 categories. You're either hot, sexy, or just like the coy, shy, and so much about it is just that. And if you don't fall in line with those, it's like, oh, like what's wrong with you? And on top of that, like if you're too coy, you're like you're suspicious and you're devious, and then if you're too sexy, it's like, what's wrong with you? So it's just like this balancing act, I think, that we're very aware of, and we also feed into it too, because but that's going off on a tangent again, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's not on a tangent at all, because that is it, and that's where the strength of the work lies, in that there's a lot of ambiguity within all the work. Like, why are these women here? Some of them are hot and sexy, some of them are a bit tongue-in-cheek, some of them maybe are a bit down and dejected, and it's all of these experiences. And what I like is because, we spoke about some of your influences, and we spoke about like pop art, and we spoke about, say, Marjorie Strider, who use the pin-up girl like you do, and we have Just Imagine in the back with the pin-up girl sort of like diving in to the water, and artists like her use that pin-up girl to sort of acknowledge the fantasy while actively dispelling it. And then you have, say, like Lichtenstein, who also kind of critiqued all those false ideals in his like love comic paintings, and you have the iconic Drowning Girl, but they're always kind of like a little bit foolish. And I like that the women in this show are certainly not foolish. And I really enjoy the work, My Pleasure, particularly for this reason, because it's like, how do women sometimes adopt these, say, erotic positions that in some ways like less than ideal, like this idea that this is how we find pleasure, and it's always going to be in a way that's acting in our best interests when often we go against our own best interests. And so, like, My Pleasure, which is essentially the cum shop picture, that's what it is. And I just was like, I liked that you brought that crassness in. Because I think that one maybe gets under people's skin a little bit more than the others. And you had some interactions with people, which are...
I was like, it was pretty funny how it reveals more about how people react to it. And we're, at least in America, like sex is still so taboo to talk. People are like, oh, like, you know, like we don't talk about it, but we all do it, but we don't talk about it, you know? And, you know, My Pleasure was certainly a piece about female desire and kind of our not acknowledging our own pleasures, but kind of this performative aspect to desire, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, and it's definitely not in servitude of one's own self. It's more like showing, oh, like I'm having a great time. Like, oh, of course I'll have this on my face, and it's great. And if people can notice, there's like a string of pearls that she's wearing, because at the end of the day, she is a lady, you know. But as long as we just smile and face it, I guess. So
yeah, no, and I like that. It's like, of course, it's my pleasure, which is like kind of mimics all this sort of like toxic positivity at times, or this like pseudo sincerity that it's like, oh, it's really my pleasure, and you're like, I'm dying on the inside. Yeah. I fucking hate you. I cannot stand you, and I wish you were gone, and I wish I didn't have to talk to you anymore. Exactly. But I'm gonna keep smiling, and it's gonna be great. But that's kind of what was good about this show, and that's why I said like it does speak across the lines of gender, because I kind of like to take a line which, you know, and I might quote a little bit now from Andrea Long Chu, and she had a book, Females, which is like somewhat, I would say controversial is not the right word, but like debated, you know, not everyone agrees, but she kind of says that the subject of female is neither born nor becoming, but an experience defined by self-negation that includes any psychic operation which the self is sacrificed to make room for the desires of another. Everyone is symbolically female because our desires for another come to us without our consent. And so that's kind of what I like about this show, and that kind of then feeds in to the title of the show, which was, you know, Look, Anna Park. And it's like every woman in here is demanding that we look. And so, you know, it's not a consensual act of looking in that regard. However, you know, it acknowledges that it's reciprocal, and it shows that this idea of the gaze is something that moves across all of these lines, particularly more things of class and wealth and fame. And so I kind of, then you then combine it with popular culture, you combine it with your references to 20th century media and advertisements, and also, you know, it now moves more into the Instagram, social media space, but then, you know, there's still physical advertisements that follow us around all the time. So, you know, while there's so many women in this show, it's not a critique of men or women. And it's definitely not saying that men are bad. No, we're not saying anything of that. It's a critique of the expectations surrounding what it is to be this ideal femininity and ideal masculinity, and how all of these are imposed onto all of us in all of our day-to-day lives. And so maybe we can kind of finish, and we perhaps sort of still touch on this, but after making this body of work, it's like, I don't expect you to have answers to questions, because I think good art like just throws out the questions and it's up to you to come up with the answers. But do you feel like, who might the ideal woman be now? Or where do you hope that things might go? Or, you know, maybe they just kind of stay the same. I hope not. I like to think that things are getting better.
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
You're an optimist?
I mean, I have my days, but I definitely think this is the best time to be a woman, and I would do it all over again. I mean, like, you know, I love being a woman. I'm proud to be, and I think the show was less so about like critiquing either men or women. It's more like the kind of frailties of just being a human being, you know, and it just happened to be that I'm a woman making the work, so the characters reflecting myself was these women. So yeah, the ideal woman, I can't really say. I mean, I think that's kind of down to the individual, right? I know that's like such a boring answer, but like, because I think that changes for me like day to day too. I definitely like what my ideal of like, you know, when I was 12, what I imagined the kind of woman I would be is not who I am now, which is good because I don't think it should be the same constantly. Yeah, it's more about like creating the space for dialogue, I think, with men and women, and I can be very cynical sometimes, yeah, against men, but you know, trying to work on it. Yeah.
It's okay. I think you answered it perfectly in that it's always something that's in a process of negotiation and becoming and is never static. And I think when we sort of come cemented and into these hard fixed positions around these like big ideas and these big concepts, which honestly also sometimes never really existed anyway. They've always been sort of false. This ideal has always been false representation. That's the best way to go. And maybe that's a good place to stop right now and just say, thank you so much, Anna. It's been my pleasure, but I mean it sincerely, to work on this exhibition with you and to have you here for the last week in Perth. And we're all just so grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm happy to take some questions, but because we are recording, I will maybe come and pass the microphone to you, and if you could just ask your question first into the microphone so we can capture it, and then I can respond. But yeah, you have a question? Okay.
Yes, you said earlier, Rachel, that Anna was working one way and then she wanted to make it larger and more easier to see from behind instead of behind glass, so you changed your technique. You said that, but could you explain how you changed to make it you able to do works like this? What the technique was? You mentioned rice paper?
Oh yeah, sorry, I kind of glossed over it. It was like in the past it was more straightforward drawing works on paper, and I would usually pin them or this is all very just like. Anyways, yeah, sorry, but technical stuff. And then now I wanted like the surface to be more like the objectness that we talked about and the wooden panels, and I adhere the foam on top. Like, I measure the foam, glue it on top, sand it down, and then paper paste on top or paper mache. Yeah.
Paper mache made with rice paper, or?
Yeah. So it was just rice paper and then like a mixture of like clear gesso and water.
And you paint it on to create the surface.
Yeah. So I pretty much like cover the whole thing in paper.
And is it smooth? We're not allowed to touch them, unfortunately.
Oh.
But is it smooth or is it textured?
Oh, it's pretty textured, yeah. I mean, the mixture of the clear gesso, I mean, the rice paper is fairly like smooth and light, but the clear gesso has a little tooth to it, and the tooth kind of offers when I meet the ground to when I work with charcoal, like it, the charcoal like has something to grab onto, I guess.
That would make it difficult for pencils, though, wouldn't it? If it was too much tooth.
Yeah, it's like the right medium. That's kind of why I've been trying to like toy with the right ratio of water to clear gesso, because when it's too much tooth, it just eats up a whole box of charcoal, and I'm like, oh man.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, no worries. I come.
Thank you very much, Anna. I just wanted to know, I guess, to what extent your family moving to the US impacts what we're seeing here versus if you had stayed in Korea. Would you be an artist? Would you be depicting popular culture and so on in the same way?
That's a good question. I do wonder about this. I think we talked about it, like what would have happened. Would I be an artist? I don't know. I mean, like it's definitely a different landscape too. It might have been really tough to be doing what I do now there, and the educational system is pretty intense, and I was not very good at school, like I mentioned earlier. So, but would I be pulling from popular culture? I'm not sure, because I actually was watching most of like American movies and TV shows when I was a kid in Korea. So maybe, I mean, this work, a version of this work might have been born out of that if I had stayed and lived there. Yeah, that's interesting to think about, though. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.